and welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show. My name is Brandon Kane, and boy, oh boy, do I not envy John Schneider. Our general manager is, for the first time in 14 years, for his first time as a general manager, is trying to seek out our next Seattle Seahawks head coach. And man, looking at these options, it's going to be a little bit tough for a variety of different reasons. Variety of different ways you can go. Different types of candidates, different types of experience, but the road doesn't necessarily look exactly clear at the moment, which we can ascertain, I think, a little bit from some of the candidates that are being bandied about here initially, as we do have some confirmation here on some candidates that are being looked at as far as they're going to be interviewed. I think they do the Zoom interview as the first function of this process. As I understand it, it kind of is one that now is starting with these teams, whereas before you could just kind of sign a guy quick. Now there's a little bit more of the NFL has instilled this process. Makes it take a little bit more time for it to go down. But we do have 5 solid names right now as it stands. And Dan Quinn, Ajay Evero, Frank Smith, Patrick Graham, and Raheem Morris have all been announced as being interview candidates at this point. And so today what I want to do as part of my ongoing little mini-series here, I'm doing a little lonesome dove action here, Hawks Nest style, and that's just a little bit of a look-see here at the available candidates, at the guys that are, going to be likely here on the list. And what I wanted to do today was look at what I would consider more of outside-the-box type candidates. I think that there's guys that make a lot of sense, that have their back track record, from your Dan Quinns to your Harbaughs to an even a Vrabel. And then there's also, I think, the assistants that are really hot commodity assistants that for sure are going to get a job this offseason. I do think that Ben Johnson's probably going to get hired somewhere. The same's probably seemingly going to be true, it would seem like, with McDonald. I would expect, especially if the Ravens were to go out and win a Super Bowl with that defense. Now, everyone else does feel a little bit, to me, uncertain on that other aspect. So that's why I'm going to call some of these outside the box, even when they are Seahawks candidates that they're looking to hire. Because if the Hawks were to go with Patrick Graham, that would be a little bit outside the box. That wouldn't be in the whoo. So we're going to look at some of these guys, both for the good and the bad. I'm not going to do too much of a deep dive on them, as I'm doing my deep dives, of course, on the individual videos that I want to do. I just did this morning a video on Dan Quinn, as we did one on Harbaugh. I'm going to be next looking at Ben Johnson, and then indeed McDonald's going to also be on my list. Hopefully get through all of those guys here in this next week for you guys here on the channel. That's the hope. But today it's going to be a little bit about just kind of locking in on some of these other candidates out here on the edges, the peripheral, who may not look exactly likely, but I think the thing that we have to understand about this process is that it's going to be a bit of a slow roll one. I spoke about in the video that I dropped this morning that, yeah, Dan Quinn does look like sort of the, option where it's almost the no-brainer. Everybody's just telling you this is the one that's going to happen, so accept it kind of thing. And that may be the case, but I do think that this is a process. I think that I've looked through other, because it's been so long since we've hired a coach, just look at through other places and how they've hired guys and moving off of old, long tenured coaches and how they worked from that. And it can be a process, and some teams really go into this exhaustively, and that they're not just looking to just go quickly and find somebody fast, but there's just this really a picking and turning over, holding it up to the light, rubbing it a little bit. Is that smudge? Is that giving it the full look-see. And then, going on to the next game look-see, and then looking at them all from the far back. So I think that's why this is kind of important to take a look at these and to know, what John had all in play and available to him, because there is a good amount of candidates this year. There's a good amount of candidates with a track record, who've been in this, who have coached for a very long time. He can go to a couple different places if he wants to here. But he's going to have to be, of course, exact on this a little bit, because whoever is taking over for Carroll is going to be standing in a very, very tall shadow, and they've got to be able to stand up to that. Part of the reason why I think people so associate Quinn here is not just the transition to the deal, but also because they feel like he wouldn't have any shying away of that. That wouldn't be any issue for him, because he does so well know the culture here. There's some good guys on this list. There's some not great guys on this list. Let's kick it off. I'm going to give you my opinion on each of them, with then also trying to give you a little bit of a snapshot on what they've done, at least what they've done recently. I'm not going to go through their whole track record on all these guys, because I think a lot of them I think a lot of them you all are aware of in most of their track record. We're going to take with the first guy off the top here that I want to talk about is going to be Eric Bieniemy. And Chad, it will be just a little bit for me to get over to you today. This is going to be probably a long opening, so I just want to prepare you guys, if we can, hold the questions because it will be over there, and I'll definitely answer them afterwards, but I imagine I might be kind of long on this opening, so bear with me on this. All right, so we've got the assistant head coach and offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders this past season. Eric Bieniemy is a guy that I don't think I got to go too far into the resume with. He left the Chiefs last offseason, where a lot of you know his work, having been undertaken under Andy Reid and serving in that role for a very long period of time. Oddly, I would say. Oddly would be the word I would use, because when you look at Andy Reid's tenure in the Eagles and with the Chiefs, offensive coordinators underneath him tend to get hired for head coaching jobs if there isn't some success going on there. And Andy Reid was having a hell of a lot of success there. Patrick Mahomes and Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator, yet it would seem that Bieniemy couldn't get a sniff. I don't really know why the NFL doesn't seem super eager on Bieniemy. He certainly was a little bit of, the players there in Washington didn't seem to completely resonate with his coaching style early on there, but maybe that was just some of the tough love and trying to change a culture there that had gotten a little bit too comfortable with winning, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think you look at his last year here where you go, okay, now you're out from under the umbrella, the protective umbrella of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. You're going to Washington. You don't have the most stacked offense. You got a couple of receivers that are interesting, an okay tight end, linemen that are average maybe-ish. And he goes out there and he's only got, of course, the quarterback position being very limited there with Sam Howell, a 5th-round pick. And so it was really a kind of a try-hard experience for him to try to get the most out of that offense. He took him to 20th in yards, 24th in total points. So you look at it from an onset of it, it didn't do anything as far as great work there. The word that comes to mind with Sam Howell is he made him serviceable. But if you come to look at this guy, to me as a person to be in Seattle, I don't think that there's any reason to draw this up at this point. If he's not drawing already that acclaim for coming on the heels of a Super Bowl with Mahomes, then I don't think that this is going to do it this year now. Still be a very good chance he goes on and gets an offensive coordinator job somewhere else. But I don't see him as a head coaching possibility just because it just doesn't seem like, I think he would have had to done a much better job this past year with the Commanders. He does bring a West Coast style offense to play, of course. It's a little bit more of the purified. You can find a little bit more of a firmer connection, even going back to Holmgren there, Andy Reid to Holmgren, than you can with some of these guys where it's really evolved past its old playbook, so to speak. And he's interested in that respect. He's an offensive-minded coach, but I just it's what I'm going to kind of gloss past quickly because I just don't think it's much of any possibility. The next guy on our list is a possibility, and that would be because the Seattle Seahawks have indeed requested a chance to interview him. And this man is the man by the name of Frank Smith. Frank Smith is the offensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. Now, it's interesting with him is that we got to take note of this as first and foremost. He didn't call plays for the Dolphins last season. That's still under the Mike McDaniel's responsibility. So he is helping and doing what he can. Now, just because you don't call the plays, I just talked about Eric Bieniemy. There's been a lot of recent coordinators underneath Andy Reid that went on to get head coaching jobs who had never called plays. So simply the fact that Frank Smith hadn't called plays shouldn't turn out to necessarily be, no, that does, definitely means that, he can't do it. It's not the case at all. He possibly can do it very well, and I'm sure Hawks are going to try to glean a little bit off of that with him within this interview. I think it's an exciting interview taking a look at a guy like Frank Smith in the Miami Dolphins offense, because the Dolphins offense to me is really in a lot of ways the equivalent of what you have with the Ravens defense. You have a forerunner for that side of the football. You have coaches, a style, a brand, a philosophy that's trying to seek to push things forward. So oftentimes coaches bring in schemes that they're seeking to just try to maximize out what already is. With these new schemes, they're really trying to drive to a forward-thinking place. And where it begins with Miami, to me especially, is yes, they're going to light up the scoreboard and a lot of fireworks, but it's also just so much of the confusion that they create with the pre and the post-snap motion. The use of going laterally rather than everything needing to be vertically, working in those flood-based principles, having things open up in the ground game sometimes off of what you're doing in the passing attack, which is really at the origins of the West Coast offense, which again, the Dolphins offense does come from, but McDaniels has taken that so far when already Shanahan had taken it so far, and then he's taken it off the back of that even further. It would be an exciting brand of football to watch. You would definitely light up a scoreboard. I'm not sure that we're in the right kind of conditions here to necessarily run this offense. I mean, it doesn't require you to throw the ball down the field a lot, but it is a little bit more of the precision-based passing. It's a little bit of the anticipatory throwing. And sometimes when you got the conditions working up in the stadium, I don't know if that would always be the best of ways, so to speak, to go with. But if he was to go in and give them a great interview and blow them away, this would certainly seem like maybe a possible guy that they really do look at. And if you are looking to lean into the offensive side of the ball and make that a real big part about what you do, then this is a guy that's going to help you to do that. He will maximize the personnel you have on that offensive side of the ball. And look at the Dolphins this last year. They were sensational, not just the 70-point burger, of course, that they put up against the Broncos, but throughout the season. 11th in points, 6th in yards. So we'll take a look at that. That was an interesting one you guys had mentioned to me, actually, a little bit in my chat in recent weeks leading up to this interview announcement with Frank Smith, and one that kind of caught me off guard. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think that they were going to go that route with this, that I saw him going offense potentially, but not going a whole hog with it, not going for the guy that puts the nos in his trunk, Next guy up is going to be Brian Callahan, another guy that's been mentioned here a little bit. And sorry for the fuzzy photo. This guy's so unknown that he doesn't even have clear photos on the internet. It's that crazy. The Callahan is a interesting guy to take a look at from my perspective. Very, very interesting. Of course, he's the son of former Raiders head coach Bill Callahan. He's been in offense there with the Bengals since Zach Taylor came aboard. And Zach Taylor, in a lot of ways, overshadows a bit of what Callahan's contributions are going to be to that Bengals team. But let's backwind this just a little bit with Callahan and the job that he did there. Number one, he has a father that's coached in the NFL, so he's going to have a unique understanding of what it takes as a first-time head coach that many other coordinators wouldn't have. But then I also look at the Burrow stint there and what that offense has done, what that offense did this year with Jake Browning taking over. And I can't help but be so very impressed. And certainly Zach Taylor there with his offensive background coming from the Rams. There's a reason he's given a big part of the praise with this. But I think Callahan's got to have his share of his hand in this. And remember when Burrow first walked in the door, that offensive line was in tatters. It was not good at all. And Burrow got hit and decimated that first year. I believe he tore his ACL at the end of the year. It didn't get much better in year two, but Burrow was still able to overcome. Their passing attack was able to overcome, especially with some of the precision short routes and whatnot, just getting the ball out of his hands, getting the ball in his playmakers in space, and then mixing that up with the intermediate and deep stuff. Not just like leaning in and just everything dinking dunking, but once we feel you as a defense pulling up, bang, we hit you with the intermediate post. Or now we're going to go over the top of the 9 route to T. Higgins or Jamar Chase. And it's been an offense to me that's always impressive to me if I see an offense that can be one of the better ones in the NFL and doesn't really have a consistent ground game and didn't really have consistent pass protection. I would reckon to guess the pass protection with this year's have been a little bit better than in recent years there with Cincinnati, especially with Orlando Brown's presence over there at the left tackle position now. But he still made them almost not missing a beat offensively when they did lose Burrow to the hand injury this year on top of the calf early on. And again, not having that ground game to lean, I still don't think they were able to ever really run the ball consistently this year. And maybe that's a little bit of a black mark on Callahan, though his father, I think, even has an offensive line background with it. So I don't know if that would be as much a big problem. They've just leaned into it, feels like, Burrow and his strengths and ability to just kind of throw it all around the yard for his ability to be a high-volume passer, but not necessarily be a turnover-prone guy within that, able to keep himself relatively protected within that. So I think this would be an interesting hire, would be Callahan. He's had a few years now there with Burrow there doing the work, with Brown doing the work as he did this year. He has the background where he knows what he's doing. It's an offensive-minded head coach you're getting. Is a little bit of the question mark of where you go. It's a bit with Frank Smith, the same thing you would be asking is what's Frank Smith? What's Mike McDaniels? What's Brian Callahan? What's Zach Taylor? I think that's a tough question to answer on that respect of it. But he is a fun coordinator to look into, and that offense would be an interesting one to put in here where, again, when you're looking at the receivers that we have loaded up for bear here, and it's not just the strength of power I think we have at the front, it's kind of the strength of the whole unit. In addition to that, this would be the type of guy, a little bit like Frank Smith, who maybe at his best to maximize this unit, get the most out of them. So a lot to like with Brian Callahan on that. Next guy's a little bit of a curveball, and one, again, we haven't heard about, but I would caution people, just because we've heard only 5 candidates at this point, doesn't mean that this list isn't going to expand. I don't think that this is going to go down quickly. The NFL have been putting in these rules where they've been sensing NFL teams sort of targeting in on one guy and then quickly sprinting to getting that guy hired as fast as possible, which is understandable. If you got a guy you want, you go hire him because then he can get his program put in as quickly as you can. But they also want, of course, with the Rooney Rule and all of that, you to be looking through all these interviews in the appropriate fashion. So I think this is going to take a little bit of time, which means candidates can open up along the way here. It does not mean that this thing just sits here where it is right now, but instead will continue to, I think maybe potentially expand, and Schneider to continue to look at more and more candidates. So this next guy is one that is again, been spoken to me about. I've seen him out there mention that he might be another guy getting another opportunity, and that's going to be Brian Flores. Now, Brian Flores came into the Minnesota Viking team this year, and the results aren't there. But you've got to understand a little bit also about what he was walking into. He's had a good, rich history coming out of the Bill Belichick tree, where he got that Miami job down there. We, of course, were hearing the reports, I believe, from even Brian Flores himself, saying that the owner was trying to tank. So some of the lack of success down in Miami is not necessarily him just not doing a good job. It was also the owner was, I believe, trying to kind of angle for the first pick. It was right around the tank for Tua time, and the owner really embraced that. He was basically riding over a sea of fans going, yes, tank for Tua. And the coach is like, I'm over here trying to win, coach. And he's like, here's $500,000 for every loss. He's like, I will not do that, sir. He moved on to Steelers for a year there, I believe, secondary as coach, and then is over with Minnesota. And so the last year, 31st in total yards, 30th in points. Brian certainly didn't do something that would necessarily stand out to you initially and say, hey, he should have another coaching job. But he's a very bright mind. And what I like about him and what he did last year is he didn't have the talent on that defense. It was an aging defense. A lot of them are kind of getting down their last legs. And he just tried to maximize what he could across the board. He sent the house a lot. I believe they blitzed at a higher rate than anybody else, well over, I think, 54%. They got hit on some of that stuff. But again, it was a defense that was never going to be probably particularly good. You had Danielle Hunter. You have Harrison Smith kind of right at the end of the last legs that he's got going on over there. You got Pace, which Ivan Pace is the guy they drafted. If you're going to draft him, you had to blitz him heavy. That was really the key with that kid. Loved him a lot coming out of college. Didn't love him a lot for Seattle because we weren't going to blitz him enough to utilize him best. That's what Flores did last year and really got a good rookie season out of the middle linebacker there up front. So he is a guy that's creative. He's different defensively than what we've had. This would be a flip of the script in the complete opposite direction as far as how a defense goes from being 4-man fronts and soft zone defenses to let's send the house, baby. Cover 0, 24/7, light up the casino lines. That's how it's going to be if we go down that route of it, which it would be fun. And look, you give this guy better talent, maybe he does get better players. I will say I'm a little reticent with him. And there's one guy in particular that's made me a little bit worried with him. I don't often come down to a single player on stuff, but with Brian on this, this is the one that I wonder about with all of his creativity. In that sometimes, he's doing too much of the circus and, not enough of paying attention to the rides. And, those rides are sometimes often held by like those single bolts, and you throw the bolt and the whole ride goes, and you end up with a 5-year-old sent 1.5 miles down the way. So you got to pay attention to all that stuff. And that's where with him, I look at a guy by the name of Minkah Fitzpatrick, and that's kind of his particular thing with that word Miami. Minkah was disgruntled, high pick out of Alabama, kind of perceived as a safe pick coming out of Alabama, and his ability to play a variety of different positions. But also a guy that the Dolphins got a little bit caught up in playing in all these different positions, blitzing, and then a linebacker, and then a little free safety, then a little strong safety. Never letting him kind of find a home anywhere, and didn't get the best out of him at that point, and ended up flipping him to the Steelers for a pick. And the Steelers ended up, turning him into a Pro Bowl player there, or not turning him, but just putting him into a pure free safety position, essentially putting him to home and then letting him flourish. And so it's a little bit worrisome for me when you have a top-end player, that you have a coach who doesn't quite understand how to get the best out of him, especially when it's for his side of the ball, quote unquote, for when it's for the defensive side of the ball that Flores is supposed to be presiding over. I look at last year as well, and as fun as that blitz heavy rate was, the results weren't really there, were they? You look at it with the 31st in yards, 30th in points, you do go, well, yeah, but if you had just been back in a front four, and would you have been like 20, 18th? And with the Vikings as close as they were to the playoffs, would that have maybe made a difference? Now, I don't know on all those accounts. Certainly when they had Cousins go down halfway into the year, that made their offense probably wear down the defense a little bit, and I didn't deep dive into the Vikings team this year yet. But he will certainly be a guy that I think is still looked at in NFL circles at least a little bit. Next guy up is a guy that I'm not going to give a lot of time to, and that's just because, but he is, I think, going to be talked about or considered a little bit. Steve Wilks, the San Francisco 49ers coordinator. He is took over, of course, this last year as the new DC, as the old DC headed on to D'Amico Ryans headed on to the Houston Texans. And, he went there to try and limit some of the big plays, cause more turnovers. That was what he was seeking to do. And, yeah, he wasn't necessarily able to do it down that track of things. And I think that perhaps maybe the Niners had a little bit of a tougher schedule this particular season than they did the previous season. But the previous year, they were second in yards, first in points. This year, after adding Javon Hargrave, after adding Chase Young at the trade deadline, they were 8th in yards and 3rd in points. So just a little bit of a tiny, tiny dip. But if you are going to, of course, look at a guy like Raheem Morris that the Hawks do have on point for bringing in here and taking a really keen look at, then Steve Wilks would be a guy that, you certainly would take a little bit, maybe look at as well. I'm not a fan, by the way, of doing this with either of these two teams in our division, being the Niners or the Rams, because not only at that point, while it's good to pluck talent from them, of course, coaching talent, you also are giving them then with the, I believe, the minority compensatory hire, I think you give them then 2 third-round picks to both of these teams for doing that, which is a little bit of the downside, which would definitely make me hesitant to take a look at either of these coaches. But when you do look at Wilks, he's got a very rich history in the NFL. He goes all the way back to 2005 in a variety of different stops. He was the Cleveland Browns defensive coordinator in 2019. Did an okay job at that time. Okay, I would say. And of course, as the interim head coach last year for the Carolina Panthers, he was able to actually kind of galvanize that group a little bit and get them to play hard there down the stretch. Of course, they came into our house in Seattle with Wilks at the helm and beat our Seahawks, playing a tough brand of football, just kind of taking it to us. He has bounced around a lot when you look at his career. He has the Arizona stay in 2018, which is kind of funny. Both Wilks and Raheem Morris both have had head coaching stints there with Arizona. Of course, the Arizona head coaching stint in 2018 didn't go particularly well, as it only did last 1 year. So you don't have much of a track record of success with him there as a head coach. You have okay track record with him as a coordinator. Even as a coordinator, hasn't done a lot. It's been a little bit of more of the in kind of given specific roles. But a guy that might be mentioned here just a little bit as well. He was getting a little bit of heat last year. We'll see with him. A guy that is on the interview list for the Seattle Seahawks, and an interesting candidate for me. Very, very interesting candidate for me, because this is a guy that did marvelous job with the Denver Broncos defense a couple of years ago when before he was let go with the Sean Payton thing, or not retained, I guess. And that would be Ajay Evero. Ajay Evero is the defensive coordinator for the Broncos. He was the defensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers this past year. Evero's defense ranks 3rd in the league in passing yards allowed, 6th in passing touchdowns, and 3rd in total yards allowed. That carries over from what he was as the defensive coordinator in Denver. So, he's done I think, a pretty decent job. Consider, again, with the guy Evero and Panthers this year, even if he's not getting the sensational results of what he got with the Broncos, but just merely pretty good results, is that he's also doing that at that point with, way less talent than he had on the Denver side of the ball. And he's got an offense, much like he had in Denver, that is not able to exactly hold up their end of the bargain. A lot of 3-and-outs, a lot of tiring the defense, with Bryce Young back there struggling in his first season, and there's just not being a lot of talent on that Carolina football. So he wasn't always necessarily put in a position this year with taking over that Panther job to be put in a position of success like he was with Denver. But he runs the Vic Fangio cover 2 shell scheme. He's one of the few coordinators. It's basically him, Staley, and Sean Desai for a single year in Chicago, who seem to be the only recent coordinators who were able to execute the Vic Fangio cover 2 shell scheme. And we started to make a little bit of that transition a couple of years ago, of course, in prior. But we didn't really fully embrace it as we were more enamored by the hybridization of both the offense and the defensive side of the ball. This guy would be able to take you all the way over there, and he would know how to teach it. He'd know how to train it. He'd know how to put it, instill it right and correctly. And I think that he is a guy that does seem to be a guy, as you look around the league, whose star is very much on the rise, who's being really, really looked at as a guy that, I don't want to say it's only a matter of time for the NFL, but just does feel like this guy continues to do what he's doing, it won't be long. And I know it is the defensive side of the ball, but he's done, that job he did with Denver looks even better this year too, does it not? I mean, you look at Denver, them bringing in new defensive coordinator this year, not really flipping out that much personnel. Yes, you lost Draymond Jones, but you brought in Zach Allen from the Cardinals. So you didn't lose, a ton of talent necessarily off that defense. But you had a way different defensive performance from that Denver Bronco defense this year versus what you had from Evero. And that, I think, does specifically speak to the job that he did. Because it wasn't like the offense was even good with Denver in that first year there with Russ there. Even then, that defense was really put in a lot of peril and tough situations. So I think you got to give him a little bit of that tip of the cap for the job that he got done in regards to that. And Evero is on the Seahawks list as an available interview candidate here that they're going to take a look at. So a lot of defensive guys on the Seahawks interview list here to start things off, which I find interesting. Here's a guy that is a favorite for many people, and I think he's going to be a particular favorite, especially here after this past playoff game, and that's going to be Bobby Slowik. He doesn't have a lot of time here in this league. He doesn't have a lot of time as a coordinator. Man, 36 years old. He is 9 years younger than me. Whew. But he has done absolutely sensational work here with the Texans and the offense that he's put together there under C.J. Stroud. Because C.J. Stroud was a guy that I did like a lot. That was my number one quarterback at last draft. I comped him up some pretty high comps out there as far as like looking and saying, man, this is some flashes of Joe Montana here. But I did not think he was going to get into that in his first year. That was going to take at least a year to kind of get him around to the pro level and be ready to run. And Slowik had this kid prepared every week. He had him cut. And now, Stroud is just a great progression reader as it is, and a great reader of the full field reader of the, as he is. Like some quarterbacks are just kind of get tunnel vision to one side. If you remember the old Madden passing cone, where they can only kind of see the cone to one side or the other, whereas he can be a full field reader. But Slowik has really done a good job of not just scheming up stuff that would be simple, easy throws in there for C.J. Stroud, but when he's scheming up the deep shots, he's scheming it up in a way where it's really giving him the clear one-on-one opportunities down the field. That's making it very easy for Stroud to make those kind of throws in those moments, because it seems like they've gotten the defense up with some of that, chaining of plays together, sequencing of plays together, sort of set the defense up to get them to pull up a little bit on that short stuff, and then you hit them up over the top. Stroud has played wonderfully, but Slowik has also gotten this guy really, really ready to go as too, and just a guy that seems another bright offensive mind. He seems to be the guy where maybe Ben Johnson was last year. And Ben Johnson's going to be a guy I do a whole video on who's not an outside-the-box candidate because he is going to be hired, but Slowik seems to be the guy, the next Ben Johnson, where he's going to have a good year this year, come back, have a great year next year, and then probably be a coach. So maybe you want to just get out ahead of this one. If it's only a matter of time with Slowik, then you go, well, let's just jump on it. Now, 36 years old is really young as a head coach, and this is the way the league is trending. They're getting younger and younger and younger, but this might be a bit too young. I think he does probably need still just a little bit more time out there, but if he were to interview and blow you away, you never know. You never know on that. The Texans were 12th in total yards this year, 20th in points. So he did a good job. Again, it's the results are, I know, more middle of the road there a little bit. But we have to understand with that Texans team is that there wasn't necessarily a sensational amount of talent on that offense. You had to, get the most out. A little bit of Tank Dell. Nico Collins is certainly rising up and becoming a player there, that's for sure. Dalton Schultz Had a pretty good year there for them, but it's not like it's a stacked crew. Laramie Tunsil left tackle, rest of the line's kind of okay. But I think able to really maximize out what they were able to do, and especially with looking at the difference between Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, two guys taken within 2 picks of each other, and seeing how he's gotten him playing versus Young. And maybe Young's got a little bit less talent around him, but I would say even the same thing was true of Richardson playing with the Colts in his first couple of games. Slowik had a plan for C.J. Stroud and how to use him best. The Colts seemed to just be throwing Richardson on the field and going, figure it out. And the Carolina Panthers kind of did something, close to it there, it seemed like, with Bryce Young, too. It was a lot of him just running back there frenetically, chicken with his head cut off kind of look to him a little bit. Next guy up here is a guy that is being interviewed by the Seattle Seahawks, and this one made my eyebrows raise just a little bit. This is Raheem Morris. He is a guy a little bit like Steve Wilks that has been in this league for a very, very long time, going back to even 2002 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a defensive quality coach. He has spent a lot of time at Tampa Bay and in Atlanta. He got actually in Tampa Bay a head coaching opportunity back in 2009 to 2011. So he had a 3-year run there as a head coach. His collective, or 2-year run, I guess is where they've got. His collective record during that time was 17-31. So Raheem Morris did not do particularly well with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when he was there as a head coach. And of course, a real important part about what you want to look for, what is going to be interesting here in looking at a potential head coach is how are they going to hire their staff? Who are they going to hire onto their staff? Because if they've had a track record, and you do have a track record to go back on of them not hiring well, that would certainly be a bit of a no on that one. That's almost a deal breaker in itself. And what does stand out at that time when he was with Tampa Bay is he had Jim Bates as his defensive coordinator and Jeff Jagodziński as his offensive coordinator. So maybe a little bit of some questions for me, just a tiny bit in regards to the staff he hires. I will give him some credit in one respect. He did have Ajay Evero on that very same staff there where he was the head coach. So, hey, but that's a plus in his column on the hiring. He's got the Hofstra background, so he's got the smart school kind of thing going on with him in that part of it. He did carry on from that defensive coordinator position to then become the Washington Redskins defensive backs coach after he was let go in Tampa Bay, eventually then getting on with Atlanta. Now, with Atlanta from 2016 to 19, he became a wide receivers coach for a couple of years, just bouncing on over to the offensive side of the ball, I guess, for the hell of it. And then he was in the Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator and then became the interim head coach with the Falcons after they let go Dan Quinn in 2020 after an 0-5 start. Raheem Morris then took the team on to a 4-7 finish with the Falcons after Quinn was let go. So I guess did a little bit better, was able to do a little bit better job, I suppose, after that point. I think what would strike me about Raheem Morris that would be very interesting with him is that he has a background here in dealing with and having some fluency in both the Shanahan offense and now as he's been with the Rams, around the Rams offense. And that's the part where I think that he might have a little bit of a, I get it, I know what to do as far as making sure not only I hire the right guy on the offensive side of the ball that can have a forward-thinking offense that can take advantage of things that both Shanahan and McVay's offense do take advantage of, but also seeing how he has faced these offenses and practices so often, maybe he also has, much like they had with our old cover 3, they used to say that there's a Seattle beater playbook. Here's your Seattle, you're playing the Seahawks this week? Okay, here's your Seattle beater playbook. Well, maybe there's a Rams Shanahan beater playbook from a guy that's practiced against these two guys collectively for damn near a decade, decade worth of time. Or not a decade, but at least a half a decade worth of time. Perhaps so. And especially for a guy that has been in this league for a long period of time. So maybe he gives you a bit of a double whammy of goodness there, where it's both, I will hire an offensive mind that's going to utilize all parts of his offense, all parts of the football field, that's going to be thinking a little bit more forward thinking, because I know that that's what you got to do to be successful offensively. And then also a guy that can have some answers defensively against some of these offenses that just so thoroughly confuse these modern defenses, just absolutely vex them. In recent years, he has done pretty impressive work with the Rams, though. Just looking at some of the baseline numbers here, 2021, 17th in total yards, 15th in points allowed. 2022, 20th in yards, 19th in points allowed. And then 2023, 19th in yards, 21st in points allowed. So he's kind of always been around the middle of the road-ish over the past 3 years with the Rams and statistically where he's gotten them. And I'm certainly, when I look to the 2021 season, for instance, I get a little bit kind of, I don't know. You have Aaron Donald, you got Jalen Ramsey, you've got a pretty good, they've done a lot to go all in on giving you from, Leonard Floyd's and whatnot on the outside and the edges. You have good defensive tackles on the inside, great gains, Ashawn Robinson. You kind of can only get that defense to middle of the road. It made me wonder a little bit, but you do look at the job he did this year, and he certainly had that defense this year performing over their talent. Though they were middle of the road this year, they probably should have been around the back end. They really only kind of had Donald and some other guys that the rookies played good for them. Kobe Turner played good, and Byron Young played really good. I got to give them props, but it was kind of only that to get them to where they were. Still hasn't done necessarily a lot. And you look at the success of the Rams in recent years, it's kind of like, to me, McVay's offense and them stacking up the defense just enough to counterbalance that at a time. And again, looking through his history, the resume is long. I don't know if it's distinguished. I will say that on this. I don't know if it's quite what I would call distinguished. It is long, just not distinguished. So let's get on to the next guy here, and that's going to be Mr. Mike Kafka. This is another man that the Seattle Seahawks have reached out to for an interview request. As you can see, he absolutely doesn't have a weird face. And he's a guy with a lot of history here with Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs, or at least a good amount of history with the Kansas City Chiefs. Mainly there is more of kind of the offensive quality control guy, quarterbacks coach, passing game coordinator, variety of roles there that you fit with the Chiefs. But you're thinking that you're getting the Andy Reid tutelage, right? The Andy Reid, I'm Yoda, here's my Luke Skywalker Padawan now at this point. That's what you think you're getting here if you're going to go for him. He's been with the New York Giants as the offensive coordinator the past 2 years. Did in 2022 his best work, 18th in the league in total yards, 18th in points scored. And then this year, of course, everything fell off a cliff for them. 29th in yards, 30th in points scored. But you're really going after him for a couple of different reasons. And I appreciate you guys on the donations. I promise I'll get to it. We just want to get through this opening here with these coaches. You're drafting him because you believe that Andy Reid tree has proved to be so fruitful in the past. It bears big fruit. You go to that tree, you pull from it. Good chance you're going to get a guy that's a legitimate candidate to get it done. So there is that. There is also the part in what he was able to accomplish with Daniel Jones last year. I think the offense of the Giants last season, when they got to the playoffs, beat the Vikings in the playoffs in a playoff game, was largely smoke and mirrors. It was them highly manufacturing things around Daniel Jones to find some sort of modichrome of success for him, and then just leaning like hell on Saquon Barkley in every way, both giving him the ball and throwing it to him out of the backfield. It wasn't the sexy Dolphins offense. It was, a little bit of just, we're going to just grind our way up the field, and it might be 3 yards in a cloud of dust on a pass play as much as a run play, but we'll find a way. So while, again, middle of the road results in what he got from the Giants in that best year of what he's had in the 2 years he's been there, he's never really had the greatest of talent on that offensive side of the ball there with the Giants, and this is his first in as an offensive coordinator, and you get something out of Daniel Jones, you've impressed me already with the work you've done. Say nothing to your play calling. I mean, that alone, because that is not a guy that I think has necessarily a ton to offer from the quarterback position as a starter in this league. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe he's just under too much duress this year or whatever, but you can't really hold much to bold with Kafka this year in the performance, because Jones, of course, was injured most of the year. Tyrod Taylor went in, and then he was injured. They got down to, DeVito And so you got pretty lean there on that team as far as what you had to go to finally get somebody out there just playing. At that point, you're not going to be a good offense. Say nothing of the fact that their line was really inconsistent. Jalen Hyatt, the rookie, gave them pretty much nothing. The receiving core was mid to be generous. So he hasn't had a lot there. I'll give him that. But this is another guy where you go, boy, it does just feel a little too soon to be going for this guy and looking at him as a head coaching option. He feels too young. Doesn't feel like he's got enough that he's accomplished in this league yet to have earned this opportunity. All right, next guy we're going to look at is a guy that I know what we got Corbin over there banging the drum for this one. Oh, my goodness. Dave Canales. Dave Canales, former Seahawks quarterbacks coach, helper of Russell Wilson, trainer of Geno Smith, helping to get Geno to his comeback player of the year award last year, of course, and then this year taking Baker Mayfield to his best season. Tapping into what Baker, that talent that had originally made Baker a number one overall pick in the draft. And last night we saw it with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers shocking the Eagles. I don't know, was it really that shocking at this point with the Eagles and how they've collapsed? I don't think it probably was. Probably makes a lot of sense why it went down like it went down, right? Because the Eagles team just seems to have been kind of flailing here as the season wound down in a pretty epic fashion. But Canales did great work with Baker Mayfield. Got him calm, cool, collected, playing under control, trusting his reads, going through his process back there, not playing kind of as frenetic at times as we've seen Baker Mayfield play, especially with the Browns and the Carolina Panthers. He had the team, Tampa Bay, as in his first year as an offensive coordinator there in Tampa Bay, Canales, 8th in points, 14th in yards. And again, looks to be a little bit of a guy that is able to maybe maximize his quarterback. You certainly know with a guy like Dave Canales, you're going to have the background there with Geno Smith and how best to take advantage of Geno. He's done a great job, as Dave, this year of getting Mike Evans with another awesome season. Evans having one of the more underrated NFL careers that we've ever seen, and continue to be able to go to Evans this year, considering as well at times you're not always as scared or fearful about the other receiving. I know Godwin's okay, but you're not freaked out about the other receiving options out there in Tampa Bay, and yet still finding ways to open things up. You think about that a little bit for DK and his ability to maybe do that for DK as well. So there's some pluses here with Dave and bringing him in with that background. You get a little bit of the bonus Benny here of like you would with Quinn, where he's been in the facility before, he's coached in the facility before, he understands the environment he's walking into and what he's trying to then carry forward. So there is some benefit there with that. It is just one season as an offensive coordinator there with him. It's a really good one, no doubt about that. He's definitely a guy who puts another year like that together. His own star is going to be on the rise, where it's a little bit like Slowik, definitely going to be on some head coaching searches at that point very soon. So it's a little bit of that concept of why not get out ahead of it, right? I apply this a little bit like this was what I was hoping to do with like a guy like Cam Moore, who I guess I'm hearing might be coming back out of the draft. But, he announces out of the draft this year where if he'd gone back to school, maybe a second-round pick, maybe a high first-round pick, if he goes to the right program and has the right kind of production. But you're getting him a year early. You're getting him in the third round, but you're just essentially anticipating that growth. You're looking and seeing that growth coming. And with a guy like Bobby Slowik or Dave Canales, I think that's in both cases what you're able to maybe jump on if you want to go with them. But again, with me, from my perspective, I just think probably just a hair too early there with him to take a look at him, though he's doing some great work. This one got me a little bit in a strange place. I don't know what to make of this one. Okay. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on this one. Patrick Graham, defensive coordinator for the Las Vegas Raiders. He labels himself a multiple guy. Clearly shows some notable tendencies on trait, though. As a defensive coordinator, he primarily likes to run a 3-4. He's going to use his outside linebackers in coverage a lot. And as a lot of times outside linebackers, you're just going to bring them as blitzers, bring them as pass rushers. He likes to drop in coverage, so he's going to want to do a little bit of confusing you. He primarily uses his outside linebackers in a 2-point stance. Unlike his mentor, Bill Belichick, Graham prefers zone coverages over man, running a mixture of cover 3 and cover 6, which allows his defensive players to drop back and read the offense. He prefers to run zone on early downs and play a little bit more man coverage on third or fourth downs. Graham also tends to blitz more on third or fourth downs to get pressure on the opposing quarterback. So I like the last two bits of notes that I was reading up on him that I just read you on that. Specifically, when it comes down to 3rd and 9s, 3rd and 12s, I thought a lot of times we have this tendency when we wanted to run it where we wanted to run it, we'll pass rush our 4 and then drop all of our guys in coverage. And I do like the defensive coach who can consider and look at things and go, if they've got to get 13 yards, their receivers have to get to the 13-yard marker. They've got to have enough time to get to that spot. And if I'm sending the blitz and I end up with a free rusher, that quarterback's not going to have that extra second to pad the ball, to tippity-tap his toes, to take that extra second to then give that receiver the time to get to the sticks. I'll have him as essentially throwing the ball away out of bounds or trying to throw kind of a miracle throw into place at that point. And so you sort of take the action of the offense, whether it's what we would often see with us, right, as we rush our front 4, drop all these guys into deep coverage because we'll pull them back to the sticks. You'll pull all your 7 back right at the sticks. They complete the 6-yard pass, and the guy runs up there and torpedoes himself forward at the first down marker, and it's a first down, right? So you just kind of let the offense sort of set itself up even in that way you used to run it. So a little bit maybe more aggression. The Belichick background means you're going to have a lot more moving parts going all over the place a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be full on kind of Mike McDonaldville, but you'll get a little bit maybe, shades, I guess, of that. In the last couple of years as a defensive coordinator, he has the Raiders in 2022 at 26th in yards allowed and 26th also in points allowed. This last year, he had the Raiders in 18th in total yards allowed and 9th in points allowed. So certainly an improvement. Antonio Pierce taking over there, definitely got that crew energized and ready to roll. Interestingly enough, this was a team that was 29th in their blitz rate this past year. So you are not getting blitzing. You might get a little bit more of the zone-based defense. Don't know if this is exactly the change that Hawk fans are looking to take a look at here. He also did have a season with the Dolphins for 1 year as a defensive coordinator. He was 30th in yards allowed that year, 32nd in points allowed. So something that stands out to me on some of these guys we're looking at is I don't know that you've done a whole lot to earn a head coaching job opportunity in this league. There's quite a few of these guys where I'm kind of looking at it going, why you? I mean, are you guys just kind of pulling, some of these are just feel like almost pulling random names out of a hat, Like, throw all the offensive, defensive, throw all the, coordinators into this hat. Here, we'll pull out a random 5 that we're announcing. I don't know. This one's a weird one to me. Maybe he is a little bit of a more respected guy out there than I'm aware of with him. I tried to do a little bit of look, and he's okay liked. He's been around the league for a bit of time, that's for sure. Goes back to 2009 with the defensive as a defensive line coach with the Toledo. Then went on to the Patriots as a coaching assistant, defensive assistant, linebackers coach, defensive line coach, linebackers coach. So he's done all the positional groups basically as a linebacker. But I don't know what necessarily is there that strikes me as something that makes you go, okay, yeah, maybe you look at the performance this year and you go, that's in division with Mahomes and Herbert and Russ. But I don't see it there with that one. But he is coming in for an interview, is this Patrick Graham. So Seahawks are talking to him. I don't know how you go from Carroll to Patrick Graham and sell the fan base on that one. I think that'll be a tough sell. Last guy on my list here is going to be Kellen Moore, maybe a local favorite, local kid out of the Pacific Northwest, who, of course, did his really best work, I think, with the Dallas Cowboys for a couple of seasons there before Mike McCarthy determined that he wanted to move on from Kellen Moore to get more of a commitment, I think, to the ground game. Than Kellen tends to be kind of a pass-happy guy, set records in the college level, I believe, for like most passing yards at Boise State or something like that, I believe he had, somewhere in that neighborhood of things. So Kellen with the Cowboys in 2022 had them 10th in yards, 4th in points, had that offense seemingly kind of humming. McCarthy takes over, though, and the Cowboys offense goes from 10th in yards to 5th in yards, and it goes from 4th in points to 1st in points. Now, None of those are monstrous leaps, but it does strike you then as you look at it a little bit that the Cowboys did improve when Kellen Moore moved on. Now, then we look over here at the Chargers, and Moore this year for the Chargers had them 18th in yards, 21st in total points. And then the Chargers in the previous year, when Moore wasn't there, were 8th in yards, 13th in points. So should it be striking that the place he leaves in Dallas is more offensively successful when he leaves, and that the place he's heading to was more offensively successful than before he arrived? It's a sample size of data, I'll give you that. I wouldn't take too much away from it. But much like a couple of these guys I would label on this list, I think that you just got to look at this and say there's a little more work there for Kellen Moore to do to prove himself to be a head coaching possibility. He is a fun coach in that he will run all the modernized concepts you can imagine in the book, especially in the passing game. He will run your 4 or 5 wide receiver sets. He'll bring guys into motion. He'll run the flood zone concepts really well. He'll take his shots deep when he's got the opportunities to do so. He's very aggressive as a play caller. A guy that, as McCarthy might say, doesn't necessarily always commit as much to the run as he should. But he is a guy whose star has been rising in the league for quite a bit of time here. And so maybe a guy within consideration for the Hawks coaching search, again, with some local ties and an offensive-minded head coach at that. But again, it just strikes me in those two different stops, not as much productivity, especially when you came there with Herbert. The thinking was you're coming in there with Justin Herbert. I don't think they looked at him and said, you're going to this year in our Charger offense get 18th in yards, 21st in points. I think that they were expecting a little bit more from him this year with all of what they were giving him as far as an arsenal goes. And I think that would be a fair assessment to him on that. I know the Chargers always got their share of injuries, it seems like, every year, but it also does seem like you should have done better than 18th and 21st in yards and points. You should be a little bit better than that. These are the guys that I took a look at. I tried to kind of pare through the lists that are out there. I will be honest with you, there's some really good candidates this year. I'm not so sure there's a deep list of candidates when I look at these guys. That's what strikes me about this particular list, is that there are some hot commodities, but there are a lot of big risks. And that boom or bust factor with some of these big risks will certainly exist. But you're going to have to be very certain on some of these young guys who are very much untested that they're going to be ready to roll and be in a position to really come out there and instill their philosophy and get people to buy in and all that. I think about guys in their like mid-30s. I understand we want to go younger here, but holy Lord, let's make sure we got guys that are going to have the players listening to them on this, like, for sure. But still, there's some really good candidates overall in this coaching search, and there is always the possibility that they go outside the box. This has happened in the past. I was listening today, I think it was Albert Breer talking on the Salk and Brock Shoke about, a little bit about the coaching search for the Steelers and Tomlin, and thinking about back at that time that it was like Ken Wisenhunt was the sort of no-brainer that the Steelers were going to go with. I was like, okay, Cowher's moving on. We're going to go to Wisenhunt. Absolutely, this is going to happen. Wisenhunt being the offensive coordinator for the Steelers at the time. But they really went through their internal coaching search. They went through all of their processes to the Steelers. They've got a unique one unto them. And they eventually arrived surprisingly at Tomlin. And that's all what I've always said about this, is that more than it being a fixation with a given candidate, it should be more a fixation with the process. And if you're doing this coaching search right, thoroughly, exhaustively, then you will arrive at the right candidate. If you just narrow your focus and get tunnel visioned up, that's not necessarily going to get you there to that side of it. So we'll see which way they go. It does seem like they're going a little bit more to the former than the latter. Does John Schneider on this? I think these are just an opening list of names. I think this is going to take more than a few weeks as far as the process goes. And I like that. I think it just makes it more likely that we then pick the right candidate. There's no guarantee for success here, but you can get yourself a little bit closer to the mark of more likely for success than not by making sure you're making the right process in place go. And so many of these teams, I know it sounds straightforward to say, yeah, no duh, everybody does that. No, not everybody does that. A lot of these owners out there in recent years have just sort of like, I like that guy, him, I want him, and not listening to the people around, not take, you want the meeting of the minds on this kind of thing. Let's see where you guys stand with it. I want to really acknowledge a couple of the donos first. I know I've been a little bit late on that here to start this off. I just wanted to get my opening spiel in here, as I know I had a lot to cover, ground to cover here with a lot of these outside the box kind of coaching candidate hires that we possibly could look at. I'd be interested to see where you guys are at as far as what you guys would like to maybe lean to, or if there's a name that strikes you above one to the other. But I thank you for watching here on a Tuesday afternoon, a little bit of a surprise show. Get ready for more of those this offseason. We've got kind of a little bit of to me, I feel a little bit reinvigorated with this new direction the Hawks are going to go. And I'm going to be very interested to see if we can, have a little bit of a new course and direction this offseason, which to me gives us just a type of hope and optimism for the future that wasn't exactly there prior. So we'll see where you guys are at with this. I thank you guys for watching. Please hit the like button if you could. I do appreciate it. Keldon, good to see you in the house, my man. Thank you for the $2 donation. Says, I meant Harbaugh. My bad. Did I miss something on the first thing you said with it? You probably had a comment in there. I'll see if I can catch your comment. But thank you, Keldon, for the $2 donation. I appreciate you. PGZ 206, thank you for the $2 donation. What's your opinion on Mike McDonald or Ben Johnson? Both of these guys, I find myself feeling in sort of equally high esteem over. I dropped my Quinn video, and Quinn's fine, but I do like the possibility of going for a little bit more of the bigger swing. You might swing and miss, but you might also put it up in the second deck. And to me, both Mike McDonald and Ben Johnson have a good chance of being second deck type hires. And with Ben Johnson, the offensive attack that he brought to bear on that Rams defense was a thing of beauty. The commitment to attack all spots in that ground game, even when the ground game wasn't really working well, you still saw the willingness to get to the edges at times, test the Rams out there on that side of it. He found the holes in that Rams defense on the back end. He committed to double teaming Aaron Donald, something that I have pulled my hair out for years, begging the team to start to do. Double team Aaron Donald. Don't overthink this. And they didn't overthink it in that game. They go, he's getting double teamed. And you saw Aaron Donald in a couple of those snaps get to a point where he was so like, I'm not even going to get like one-on-one, that he almost gave up on a few of those plays. You could just feel Donald going, I'm not even going to get a chance here to go one. I'm just getting doubled up here. And he's obviously had a great season throughout. What he's done with Goff, creative offensive attack, the willing to hit you at all levels. Seems to be a guy with I think that PGZ, he's going to be much like I think with Quinn. I think Quinn and Johnson are two guys that are, if I was laying down my money, I would say are going to be head coaches this offseason one way or the other. Whether it's here or somewhere else, they will be head coaches. With Ben Johnson, he is the best candidate to me be PGZ of the offensive-minded head coaches out there that you could go out there who aren't former head coaches that are true right now coordinators. And he's earned this chance to get this job at this point. The last 2 years, the work he's done there with Detroit, he's been outstanding. Wonder kid, and he's going to be GZ my next video that I do on the channel here after Quinn. I'm going to be doing on Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald. Equally impressive on the defensive side of the ball. Both of these two coordinators are forward-thinking guys. They're not trying to lean and hold on to the old. They're more interested in pushing the ball forward. Utilize what still might work on the old, but we're pushing the ball forward. And Mike McDonald is the defensive attack that he brought to bear on our Seahawks, GZ, in that week, whatever it was, 7 game. Was one of the more impressive that I've seen against our Seahawks unit the last couple of years, because it was a manufactured thing. It wasn't, okay, here's Bosa and Armstead and Hargrave and Chase, and where they're just going to rush you and just collapse the pocket. This was, different fronts, different coverages. He had Geno head spinning by the third quarter, not knowing which way was up. And he did that to a lot of coordinators. Did it to the Lions. Did it to Ben Johnson this year. I mean, they smacked the crap out of the Lions. That game was over just as quick as our game was over against the Ravens by what that defense did to them. It's awesome on both fronts here, where some defensive coordinators do very interesting things on the back end, Jeezy. Some defensive coordinators do very interesting things on the front end, like Quinn. Quinn does interesting things on the front end with his stunt game and some of the looping and all of that, the games they play up front. What you have with McDonald is he does both. It's both interesting what he's doing up in the fronts, and it's interesting with what he's doing in the coverages on the back end. And that makes him really, truly unique. I love them both. I think McDonald might have every bit as much a chance of being hired as Ben, especially if that Ravens team goes on and wins the Super Bowl this season. But both of those guys to me are, I think I find them both in my top 5 on my list. And with Ben Johnson, he might be at a spot where he's climbed up to 2 for me over the top of Quinn, as I'm kind of looking more and more into these guys. John Paul C., thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that, John. Says, defense still wins championships. Evero. Evero is a great, legitimately, I think, great defensive coordinator. And I don't know what he would do for the offense, John. I don't know who his hire would be for that. But I do know that he would take this defense and turn the defense around. I just think he strikes me as a guy looking at his work who knows what he's doing on that side of the ball, who seems to have had the understanding and resonance with Fangio's scheme of how to run it correctly, how to run it right, where so many of these guys just seem to get confused on the proper order of it in that way. But he does seem a guy, much like a couple of these other candidates I've talked about, being Ben Johnson, McDonald. Evero does seem like a guy that it is a bit of a matter of time before he's going to get that head coaching opportunity in this league somewhere. Thank you, John. Appreciate you. Phoebe Moore Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, congrats on 15,000 subs, B. Well, thank you very much, Phoebe. I also want to thank all of you out there for the folks that helped get us up over the top of 15,000 subscribers. We indeed got ourselves inside our goal for the year. We had a third of our channel growth this year and climbing, still going, still counting. So it's been a fantastic year here at the Hawks Nest. I want to thank all of you guys for helping us get over that mark for subbing up. It's hard to get a person to sub. It ain't easy to get somebody to hit that sub mark. So I do really, really appreciate having the folks out there who jumped on here and got us up over the top. Got us over the top. Now we're on to 20. On to 20, Phoebe. Sanchez has been celebrating 15 long months here at the Hawks Nest. Thank you for that, Sanchez. I really, really do appreciate it. That long-time support. He says no Quinn, no on Vrabel, no on Morris, yes on Harbaugh, yes on Johnson, yes on Canales. Meh, everyone else. Yeah. I'm basically with you. I can't quite get there with Canales because I feel like it's one offensive coordinating season and as a quarterback coach. I mean, that doesn't prevent him, but it does just feel a little potentially early on that one. But I know again too. Corbin's banging that drum on that one. Vrabel, I'm finding myself warming up on Vrabel. I'm not completely at a yes or completely at a no, but it's warming. It's getting to a lukewarm state. I can't get to Quinn, but Quinn is kind of, I find myself dropping him down my list just a little bit from my perspective, where I just go, I get all this stuff with the seamless transition and, not the sheet, won't have the problem of Carroll's shadow thing and but I don't know. Every time I listen to a media member talk about the Seahawks coaching search, they just say Quinn. Quinn. Who do you think? Quinn. I don't know. It's weird. It's very strange. But I'm good with your list, man, Sanchez. I'll go with it. V. More Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that. Says, did you see the Lions Stadium chanting Jared Goff? It's hard because it comes out goof when it turns into a chat and it goes from Goff to goof. Yeah, it's really cool to see what Detroit's done there in embracing Jared, who, got kicked to the side. And, look, Sean McVay's been validated in doing that. Stafford got them to the Super Bowl, and Stafford's just a better quarterback. He just is. Goff has more to work with there with Detroit. He played a great game against that Rams team, and you got to give him props for that. I undoubtedly, that was a great performance there throughout the season, throughout his time there in Detroit. He's been very good. And it is cool. It seems like the right thing in a town like the city like Detroit that's been hard on their luck, that has had a hard time scratching back here now. Their second playoff win in 3 decades. And that they have a quarterback like this that's had to fight hard to find his way too. It does feel a little bit fitting. So props to the Lions organization and Jared Goff and doing what they're doing out there. They didn't change their approach in that playoff game. They didn't get conservative or get tight. Campbell went out there and went out there with that, wheelbarrow and his balls in that wheelbarrow and rolled it up there to the sideline and kept calling and going forward and doing what he did throughout the year. And even then, it was cool about Campbell's. Then when he had those moments where, okay, Dan, don't go hog wild here. You need a punt here now. Trust back in your defense. Your defense is starting to kind of hold things up a little bit here. He did that too. He read the game a little bit, whereas we think of Dan as just being a blunt force coaching instrument at times. In his approach, there he actually showed a willingness to kind of like, oh, okay, nope, take the punt here. It was better to go forward on the previous thing, but I'm going to just take this here now and go with this. So, yeah, Dan's done a great job. Goff's done a great job, and it's great to see the fans have appreciated what he's done out there. Both of them. Let's see how the chat's doing here. See what you guys' thoughts are on this one. We got a lot of David Canales love. Mortal Texas, David Canales is him. Free Truth says KJ would be a great linebacker coach. I think KJ would be a great coach in general. He's said that he's thought about doing it, just not sure if he wants to do it. And I get that. It's a commitment. Lisa Mack, Dan Quinn might go to the Commanders. He might. Commander's job has been very quiet. They're keeping that thing under wraps. Thomas Cox. Yeah, UW offense distracted. Not to take permission. They want to. Sorry, maybe speaking to this. Talon Deal. Hey, B, mark my words. Mike McDonald will be the first to match the modern offenses. He will be looked at as an Andy Reid on the defensive side of the ball. Look what he has done to the Shanahan tree. I love it, Talon. I love your thought on that. I'm as I've said, McDonald has warmed up to me. I find myself, obviously I'm pulled. You guys know I've got my one guy that I like, that I lean on, but I do feel myself as I go deeper and deeper through this process, feeling more and more pulled to say McDonald, Ben Johnson, 2A, 2B, and depending on the day of the week when I wake up, take your pick. And I think that McDonald, what he's done there, that defense has just been sensational. Going back and watching the All-22, it both confused the hell out of me as much as it confused Geno. I'd sit there and look pre-snap and I'd go, okay, how is Geno supposed to recognize this post-snap? How's he supposed to recognize you're going to take your slot corner and turn him into your free high safety with no given indicators and him showing a pressed look at the snap? It's fun. It's good defense. Felice Mack, Vrabel's warmed up to me a little bit with it. The more I think about Vrabel and what he did with the job there in Tennessee, the more I feel myself appreciating it. Nick Guzman says, I swear you guys don't listen to KJ. He states every stream he is in coaching right now because he wants to spend time with his family. Well, he had the interview with the guy, the one stream he did with the guy that is the in-house guy. Somebody in the chat will have to help me out with the guy that was there for even Holmgren's time period. And he was trying to sell KJ on it. And KJ was doing a lot on that show that he talked about, Nick, where he was like talking about that he felt pulled to go and do it, that he wanted to go do it, but that he is pulled a little bit to not do it because of the time thing. But he has erred a couple times on it. That he's talked about it. Dale says, that being said, I want Ben Jones first. Ben Jones. And then Mike McDaniel. Oh, Ben Johnson, I think, is what you're meaning. And maybe Slowik, depending on his interview, because he started on the defensive side of the ball and converted under offense under Kyle Shanahan. It's always good to get a little bit of that mixture for a coach who's been on both sides of the ball. I think he meant Nick Guzman, and I think he meant Ben Johnson. Yeah, Ben Johnson. O'Dwyer, after watching Schneider press conference, I think he's looking for a young offensive-minded head coach. He said when hiring defensive coaches, if your offense does well, they'll be gone after a year or two. Yeah, it's another little great point about the twist of that being that, you get a great defensive coach and then you say, well, okay, he just has to hire a great offensive-minded offensive coordinator. But then, as to your point, that O'Dwyer, the offensive-minded coordinator, goes out there and flourishes and does great. And then what's the first thing that happens to him? He gets plucked, and now your defense coordinator has to go make another great hire on the offensive side of the ball. And you wonder with that, how many great offensive coordinators does a defensive-minded head coach have in his reservoir to call upon if that becomes a bit of the case? And so you meant, Bobby Slowik, of course, right now this year is like a given example of that, where D'Amico Ryans hires him this year to work with CJ Stroud, and he's like, "Yeah, I got my brilliant 36-year-old young offensive coordinator," and then he's gone after a year, and now D'Amico's got to find his next guy. And that's a bit of the nature of the beast to a degree, but it does make it, I think, a bit of more of a challenge versus an offensive head coach who at least has a little bit of an overall guiding hand over the top of the offense that doesn't allow you to have that get kind of kicked out from under you if a coordinator gets hired, your OC gets hired. Kind of like we've seen with Reed through the years. He loses his coordinators, his offense doesn't really miss a beat. But that's an interesting tidbit, Dwyer, and you're reading into it. I guess I would read the same thing in. I was trying to glean something from the Schneider presser, but it was most of it to me was just him kind of saying a lot without saying a little. Him saying a little without saying, him saying a lot but not saying much. Yeah. U2 cases, I know how everyone is all steamed up about Ravens defensive coordinator McDonald, but I'm very high on Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken. He's done a great job too. Yeah, his development of Lamar Jackson at the quarterback position, especially this year, as a passer within the pocket and really getting him into sort of the perfect balance between scrambling and throwing and, going through a process in the pocket. It's been impressive. Tommy says, John said he's looking at the league trends right now too, and the overwhelming trend is offensive head coaches. It really is. I think you've just got to, it's hard not to look at it and take away when you look at the data. What I just list last year, you got 16 total teams that are first or second place teams in the entire NFL in their different divisions. 16 total teams. 10 of those teams are led by an offensive-minded head coach. 5 of those teams led by a defensive-minded head coach, and 1 by a special teams guy. That was his background. So that's 2-1. 2-1. That's a pretty big discrepancy. And I know it's just 1 year, but this is where this seems to trend even further every year. Talents has Ben Johnson's taken vastly different running backs and made them dangerous. Did amazingly with tight ends and took a slot to the top and can stretch the field with someone like DK. He fits the bill. He does fit the bill. Nick says the team has DK, JSN, K9, Charbonnet for years. Plus, Geno is better than most Seahawks fans give him credit for. Why wouldn't John want an offensive-minded head coach to maximize these talents? I do think he would. I think a little bit of what people are thinking here a little bit is that you just look at the interviews that you've announced here off the rip. Dan Quinn, Ajayi Evero, Frank Smith, Patrick Graham, Raheem Morris. Most of those guys are defensive coordinators, so that's a little bit of what I think has people, I think, looking a little bit, Nick, they're going, okay, so are we kind of leaning more that way, with it? But I again think that's the right approach, is to go an offensive-minded head coach. UG cases, I think whichever combination gets you Evero at DC or head coach and a good OC or an offensive coordinator, and Evero at DC would be a great combo. Sign me up for that, Huey. You can get Evero in as I don't know about head coach, but I'm open to it. If he really blows them away in the interview and he seems to be the bright mind that so many speak about him in, then I'm open to it. But I would really love to be able to slot him in. Go get the offensive head coach and then slot in Evero as your DC. And besides, says our D was horrible. That's why we should go for DC as a head coach. Tommy says, I think our defense gets better just simply for the fact that Pete will not be coaching it. I think there's a good point in that. He says, Ben Johnson also has possibly the best offensive line in the NFL. I lean Slowik because he has had less to work with. That would be true. Certainly does not have that line of Detroit, the two-back system, tight end. Schultz pretty good, but Porter's better. Shane Germany says, thank God, no more soft zone defense anymore. Don't count your chickens till they're hatched, Shane. We got to get the new coach in here. I got Patrick Graham on this list right now. They may just do it to us. Free Tree says, okay, I'm going to say it. I've held back. But what about Belichick? Belichick is one that I've passingly thought it would be pretty hilarious. I think he is an East Coast guy, or at least a Midwest guy minimum. I don't know if he likes to go out there and sail out there in the Atlantic, on the seaboard. On that seaboard, Belichick's out there on that seaboard fishing again. He likes to fish out there deep in that water. I've thought about it a bit. Bill, the narrative is coach still good, general manager bad, and that you may have to get the general manager if you're going to get the coach. But let's just remove the general manager as a possibility here. Bill Belichick, when it comes to even just look what he did with his offensive coordinator a couple of years ago, hiring Matt Patricia and company. I don't know with him at this point, with where he's at, if he's kind of as tight as he once was on that, I can't find myself getting excited about a Bill Belichick possibility. Rockman Drums, I'm thinking John is interviewing for defensive coordinator first, then interview for a head coach that will take care of the defense. Ooh, I like that, Rockman Drums. I like that. Because he's got in all those guys. Well, not in all those guys, but at least in Evero's case, and maybe Graham's case, guys that will be available. This is no Morris, rather Quinn or Evero or McDonald if we're going DC. Yeah, Morris doesn't do a whole lot. Some of these coordinators, they bounce around and get a lot of jobs, but you just go, man, what do you do here? Hmm? Lazy Dog says this owner wants a young man in her office. You really want the job, Ben? You've heard of the casting couch. This is called the owner's couch. Did see the presser today with John Space. It was a good presser, but didn't know if there was a lot of information I was pulling from it. Mortal EOTech, I don't know what the Seahawks see in these candidates. Some of these ones are a little, real far outside that box. Like, what are we doing? Greg says, I see people getting caught up in who's going to be the new head coach and forgetting you're needing 3 coaches either way. So the real question is, who would be the best combination of coaches to put it head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator? I think some of that also depends a bit on Greg, on which of these coaches who might be out there, like a Jai Evero, which of those is not going to maybe be a head coach who now is available as a DC, who you weren't sure was going to be available as a DC if they were going to get hired as a head coach. But I think you've got to first start with the head coach, because a lot of time there, Greg, the head coach is going to want to bring in his OC and DC, rather than you saying, okay, you're the head coach, now I'm going to give you this guy, and then I'm going to give you that guy. So I think you got to get a little bit first to the head coach part of it. And to your point on that, Greg, you've got to have with the head coach you're bringing in and who you're considering. That's part of, and like featuring this morning on that video I dropped on Quinn, where part of, the bonus and the plus side that he brings to the table that's got to be considered is he's probably going to assemble a very good staff, a legitimate staff. And that is a bit of a question mark you'd have with other guys, but is a part of the consideration nonetheless. He says, I wanted John gone too, but I'll take what I can get. Think retention of John Schneider was critical for Jody to fire Pete. Yeah, I think it also comes down to a bit of you. I think, and I think I know it's one of our long debates on this, but I think it does come down to a bit of too of Carroll having some of the decision making over the top of Schneider in a lot of different moments, and some of these more bigger decisions that have happened on this organization over the past couple of years. I think Jody kind of recognizes that, and that if he was being overruled at times, and many different times at that, then it's hard to hold him necessarily personally accountable for those decisions of Coach Carroll. But also here, Yui, let's keep in mind with this as well. John's not going to have some, long measure of cord here where he just gets to run wild and free into the near future. If he can't bring things about in the right way either, I don't know, he'll be a long-lasting guy here. I think everybody's, being held to a account at this point. Tom Eden says, what do you mean? Daniel Jones has the ultimate confused poker face. Defenses have no idea what he's thinking. He doesn't even know. Total mystery man. Yeah, they had that. One of the greatest shots of the NFL season was the shot over the top where they show the quarterback's face as he's coming up to the line of scrimmage. And you got Daniel Jones with those eyes. And this is literally what he's doing as he's looking over the defensive line. I'm identifying the mic. Where's the safety? I don't know why he went into like Tourette's, but it was weird. It was gone. It was weird. Kevin O'Connell wants Mike McDonald all day. Let's go. Slowik plus a gyro. Johnson plus a gyro. Johnson plus a gyro would be a dream team. Kevin says, let's get Brandon hired as OC. He knows his shit. I'll take the job. I'll max out this talent. You better believe DK Metcalf ain't getting 2 targets through 3 quarters. That ain't happening on my watch. Who's got Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore? I don't know, Amy. Is Kellen a little bit overrated, maybe? Just, a smidge? Maybe? Yeah, this game seems like we're going for an offensive-minded type head coach. That's what Schneider said. Ooh, you guys caught a little bit more detail on than I did. I think you guys are right on this, though. Mark Harbaugh says, hi, I've been bad 2 weeks, been sick plus. Had to put my best friend in the hospital. Oh, man, I'm sorry to hear that, Mark. I hope your best friend's doing better. I hope you're feeling better as well. There's been some nasty bugs going around this time of year. Just nasty. So keep yourself healthy, my man, and good seeing the chat. This is no Vrabel. Quinn's better hired than him. I'm looking back at the job he did with Tennessee. I like what Vrabel did. And I know he's going to get the team ready to play every week. But I get those that don't like Vrabel really don't like Vrabel. Alex says Waldron could have been held back a bit with the opening playbook because of Pete. Absolutely. I think it's a real possibility, Alex. Dan Low Music says Vrabel has had 0 to work with outside of Derrick Henry. I mean, that's a little bit of my feeling on this too, is that you look at what he did with that team and where he took that Tennessee team, and every year having them, competing. And even as that offensive line started to fall back through recent years, he still, I know this year it finally fell apart, but, Vrabel had them in the mix of it. And, he got them to a conference championship with Mike Tannehill at the quarterback position. What happens if you give him a real collection of a talented team? I wonder on that. And on you, I mean, LaFleur left, but it was also the offensive line starts to fall apart. They don't restock it well. They make picks like Caleb Farley and Fulton on the other side of the ball that just aren't necessarily good picks even on the surface of it. You trade A.J. Brown and don't get returns back for it that are anywhere close to what you had there before, and it's just the talent started to leak out and wasn't already necessarily top notch. I don't know. I just find myself a little bit more appreciating the job he did down there and kind of warming to him a little bit. I'm not saying he's like high on my list, but definitely warming up. Alex, just imagine they throw us a huge curveball at us and hire Bill Belichick. That would be, you talk about making the Seahawks fandom's heads, brain fall out of their skull cap. Danlo says, thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Danlo. I think Vrabel's getting definitely a head coaching job somewhere. Ray Kemp says, Dave Canales was the passing game coordinator for the Hawks. The year DK had 1,300 yards, Lockett at 100 catches. And I heard the Bucs had two 1,200-yard receivers this year, so I'd be willing to give him an OC job at the least. I would too, Greg. It is hard to sometimes get the offensive coordinator to do the lateral move, right? Unless you're letting him go somewhere, and the Buccaneers probably aren't going to let Canales go. Lisa still can't believe Pete Carroll said the ownership doesn't know football. It was a little shot. It was a tiny, tiny little shot, that's for sure. But it was also a little bit of, I think, maybe protecting Schneider at the same time. It does free Schneider up of kind of responsibility in that. Knox's curveball, Belichick head coach, Vrabel DC, and Kellen Moore offensive coordinator. That'd be cray-cray. Rockman Drums, I'm telling you, he's hiring a defensive coordinator first. Then after the season is over, an offensive head coach. Mark my words. I said it here. Copy that. Shit. You're on the record, bro. You're on the record. Dayline yesterday says Ben Johnson can move this team forward. Rafael Sierra, y'all think John Schneider will pick offensive coordinator, defense coordinator, or will he leave it to the next head coach? And would that be a reason to go with a lesser known name? I think you would typically tend to let the coach go with his picks here, Rafael. But maybe there's already been some backdoor dealings between, let's say, Schneider and Ben Johnson. And he's like, hey, Benny boy. And he's like, yeah, Johnny, what's up? And he's like, yo. We'll come to Seattle. And he's like, yeah, you're going to rip me off $14 million a year like I've been asking you folks for? He's like, yeah, let's do this after the year, but I'm going to hire the DC, all right? All right. Click, click. Maybe in a case like that you start hiring the DC ahead of time in a scenario down that track, but hard to say on that. And he does have the power over the staff, but that's also, Rafael, sort of the typical thing you get with a general manager normally. They can tell a coach, you're letting this guy go, you're doing this. It doesn't always mean the coach will, then it's going to be like, I quit. Like we just had happen. Please, Mac, I think it's better bring offensive-minded coach because we have a bunch of talent on offense. Already JSN and DK with Lockett. We just need an offensive line. I like that approach. Jag Sports Talk with Jose Rodriguez. And folks, please do sub on up to Jose, one of our longtime mods here, trying to get up over the top of 1,000 subscribers over on his channel, and he is very close. Johnson, Evero, and the Texans OC are my top three. That's a great top three, Jose. I like all three of them. All three are nice. Greg, it was interesting to see how John said in the press conference that losing a good offensive coordinator can hurt a rookie quarterback development while referencing Alex Smith as an example. Offensive head coach pick could be to help rookie quarterback. I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, even if you do like going with Geno in the near term, you're going to need to address the quarterback position with the guy going into his mid-30s one way or the other. And that's going to then need a guy that can be a steady hand and guide that guy through. And especially look at what they've done there with Green Bay and Jordan Love and his development there now after sitting for a couple of years and having the same kind of folks in play to bring him along. Probably very, very important. And I think that Schneider will look at that Green Bay situation there with Love and how they did and with what they did with Rodgers and probably try to take a bit of a page from that, I would reckon, especially already having sort of Geno still here playing okay football. Brian Meyer says, Brandon, good to see you back. Thank you, Brian. It's good to be back, brother. Alcoholic says, again, I'd be okay with anybody but Harbaugh. You're not the only one there. Mo Kelly, that's it. When KJ Wright was doing the Mo Kelly interview, Mo Kelly was doing the hard sell. We can get you in the building right now, KJ. He's like, come with me right now. Let's turn this podcast off right now. You come coach right now. KJ was in there like, King Tay says, bring in Harbs. He's with me. Let's go. Man, the Pits, his impression of Schneider, Quinn would be a stagnant move. Big Hawk says, what's that, Jody? Mike McDonald, you say? Make it happen. Man, the Pit, we could do a poll, man. For the DC. I don't know. I think we're doing just a quick show today, but I'll be back tomorrow. So we're doing a show today and tomorrow. We're going to be looking at PFF scores tomorrow. So maybe just a quick in and outer today, but tomorrow I will. Don Modest says, I'd take a Super Bowl winning young defensive coordinator as a head coach, even though OCs are the hot thing right now. Makes sense. Makes complete sense. Please do hit that like button. Thanks for reminding me of that, Jose. Would appreciate you guys. Tyler says, if you hire Quinn, it's like hiring Carroll back. I agree, Tyler. It's a little bit of kind of keeping around the same path on that, isn't it? Well, Hand Grenade says, Bill's interviewing for the Atlanta job. That makes a lot of sense, that connection there to Atlanta. I could see that happening, though. They have a pretty strong general manager in place there. I don't know if Bill's going to get a chance to come in there and try to wield any power in that part of it. Nick says, anyone wanting Dan Quinn simply doesn't want the team to go forward. It's sitting in neutral. He's a downgrade from Pete, if anything. Potentially could be that. Yeah. Ryan Meyer says, Harbaugh's a legitimate son in the chat. We have not interviewed Harbaugh yet, Herbicide, that I've been that we've been made aware of. And it's possible, Nick, that Harbaugh doesn't come here because he doesn't have the control. That's something that's been told to me a lot on this, Nick. The one thing that I think that when the folks that say this on this is that we don't know that that's the way that this is going to be for sure with Harbaugh. So I mean, it's a guessing game to say that, like, well, he's for sure is going to get the control. Someone's going to get him. Are we sure some teams out there are going to be willing to really give him that control? When you look out across the league landscape, there are not a lot of teams that are necessarily handing out the reins to the front office to head coaches. And it may be something a team is willing to offer, maybe, but I don't know that there's a guarantee on Harbaugh that that's going to be the case with this one. I think that's a bit of a wait and see how that sort of plays out on that part of it. I certainly think that Harbaugh is at least bare minimum in play. I don't think that necessarily he's a front runner candidate, but I do think he's in play. And I don't know about that. I've heard other reports too, Nick, that he's not asking for that control. So it's like, what's really the truth there? Lee says, I like the whole cigar thing. Still crazy to me. KJ Wright was speaking facts. This generation doesn't care about football. It's the TikTok generation league now. We're all screwed. It's definitely a worry from my standpoint too, Fleece, when I watch the nature of the sport and where it's going into the future is there are a lot of changes that are happening, that are going on, and it's changing the way the sport looks and the nature of the sport. And I don't know, maybe it'll be the alternative leagues that they're creating in the springtime, which will be the new hotness. But it's, yeah, I know what you're talking about with that. Campbell Toe Harris says, Quinn, Big Hack, Harvey seems to have a bromance with Justin Hillbilly. He does seem to want some of that Herbert love. Herbert love. If you guys do have a question, make sure to please hit at the Hawks Nest, because we have a lot of internal discussion. No big deal there, but just trying to pick through where we might have a question on these. Tony Wright, what's up, my man? You feeling good about Bill Belichick in your Atlanta? What's poppin', Brandon? Man, if your organization ended up hiring Jim Harbaugh as your new head coach, I'll bet a year of my salary that the 49er fans' asses would get real tight. Oh, they already have. My Harbaugh video is already filled up with a lot of comments from 49er fans coming in there. And when I get the Niners commenting a lot, I know I've kind of struck a very, 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 very soft spot. So it would be, biblical. It's gonna be biblical. But it would be, the memes would be hilarious. Nick says everyone just wants to throw Geno under the bus. Is everyone going to be a rude awakening when you guys realize Seahawks fans don't value Geno more than anybody around? He's not going anywhere. I'm not part of the everyone, Nick, so I'm definitely not throwing him in. I'm a Geno supporter, man. I couldn't be more of a Geno supporter. And I think he does remain. Brian, GMs don't hire assistant coaches. The head coach man does. Why would a coach take a job if he's not allowed to fill his own staff? Doesn't work that way. I agree. I think, 9 times out of 10, Brian, it absolutely does work that way. I do think that there's the rare occasion where you're hiring maybe a young coach who doesn't know what he doesn't know, kind of, and then you're saying, okay, look, you know offense, you're head coaching, or we think you're gonna be fine at head coaching. Let us take care of the defensive side of the ball for you. I think there are conditions that can kind of exist to do that, but like you say, it's by and large not the way it works. Tom Eden says DK would have to ice bathe his hands if Brandon was head coach. You better believe it. I'd have him at 250 targets by week 12. Like, DK be walking over there out of breath every time. I'd be like, and I'd just be over there with a big chest hair smile, like, you get enough targets? We get you some more touches. JSN just go for JSN. He's got it. Ryan E says, you do wonder why we don't routinely send DK on the go routes. Nobody can match his speed, and those who come can't close him down. I think they get a lot of cover 2 looks, and cover 2 looks are highly dissuading away from running a 9 routes against, because you just get that bracket coverage, and you end up sort of throwing it into a de facto double team. And Hawks get a lot of the cover 2, Brian. But then we turn the coin over the other way. How do you get them out of the cover 2? By running the ball more successfully. Because then you're going to get the single high looks. Then you're going to get some opportunities with DK on the outside to really, take those 9 routes over the top. But you need the running game, and you need the consistent running game, and you need to force those teams to feel like they have to devote the extra resources down by the box to really make that happen. And I think that's really where it could kind of stand from. They do a lot of 9 routes, but it's one where it can be a lot more efficient and effective, I think. Big Hawk says, I'm biased towards the defense of head coach, but throwing caution to the wind, Lincoln Riley, it's settled. And Tommy Eden, DK working out of the slot would be a nightmare. They used a little bit. They waited pretty deep into the year to try to call upon it, but they did use it a little bit this year. Who's going to put him down? Who's going to put on him to match his size and speed? It's a first and down in the huddle. I think the new head coach will use this a lot more, especially if it is an offensive-minded head coach with DK in the slot. And I think he's very tough to deal with down there, especially not just for just generating separation, but just because of how much you have the size of his body versus smaller slot cornerback trying to get through him to the ball. If you throw it up on his body, there's really nowhere for that corner to go sometimes. Voodoo Magic, thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that, Voodoo. Says, for your triple victory in a row last night. Well, thank you for that, Voodoo. And I have been doing some more Twitch streaming. So if you guys are looking, we'll probably be on there streaming this evening here, or this afternoon, maybe even afternoon. I don't know. I'm going live anytime I want to go live. But thank you. We got 3 victories last night. So if you guys do ever watch anything on Twitch, do please sub up to me over there. I'm the Seahawks Nest over on Twitch. I would appreciate it. And thank you for watching last night, Voodoo. was a hell of a night. We were feeling good about our win, man. Everybody was feeling themselves in the morning. I was getting some text messages like, yeah, we got that. Appreciate you, though. Appreciate you. Sanchez, thank you for the $5 donation. Thank you so much as well, Sanchez, for all your donations here to the chat and all your support to the channel. I live in Atlanta, and I'm trying to convince my Falcons friends to sign Russell and draft Penix. No brainer. Well, Russell has felt like to me, as far as landing spots go, as the big no-brainer would seem to be Atlanta. I mean, what you get Belichick in there. You sign Russell to a 1-year veteran minimum, which would be like $2 million. So you're paying nothing to Russ. Like you say, you draft a Penix where you've got a great offensive line in place there with Atlanta. So they'll be able to probably keep him pretty clean. And you have a guy in Bill Belichick, Sanchez, who's got a history of running spread-based concepts. So he will maximize out what, Penix does. And you also have a guy in Belichick that can run the old school offense where Russell under center, Russell rolling out. And, there's some intelligence behind that, man. I'm going all the way around on that kind of move, especially with Belichick landing in there, because he can make both those quarterbacks work. And if Russ is looking for the best possible landing space for success, I don't know if there's going to be a better spot than Atlanta for him. I like it, Sanchez. That's some big brain stuff right there, man. No brainer, more like big brainer when I say to that. I like all that connection. Penix already a couple receivers to work with if he's got to come off the bench. Russ gets a prove it year to try to put his value out there, right? All the way around, that makes sense, man. You're not marrying yourself to Russ, bringing him in on a 1-year deal. More Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that. I love the playoffs. I lost all my games in betting. I got a little bit into some stuff myself. Didn't do typically great this year. I had a couple of hits this year, but then got hit on. I just missed a couple of others. Kind of learning my way around it this year. It's the first year I've really even tried to kind of throw stuff out there. So this was a bit of a learning year for me when looking at my bets on my stuff. But some oddly played games and some of the ways that it broke down and wore out and went down here. Some surprises there, especially, Texans winning as they were and Tampa Bay taking down Philly. I would have told you Tampa was taking down Philly, though. If you'd asked me, I would have told you Tampa was going to win that game because Philly has just been in a tailspin, an absolute just downward spiral of death for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. It's been brutal to watch. And so that's one you definitely want to take. But it's been a pretty fun playoff games. Boy, the intensity's been good. Good football for the most part. Blowout here or there maybe, but overall good. I'm feeling it. Tyler says, that'd be crazy for John to do it. If he hires a coach, he needs to let the coach make his own coaching staff. Yeah, I think that's probably what was likely to be the way it goes. I think what John was saying about the control of the staff today was more about he does ultimately, a general manager will and can ultimately come into a head coach and say, okay, you need to let this OC go. You need to let this DC go. He does have that control and power in a way that he didn't have with Carroll. The Wu-Tang Life says, hire Quinn, and you just hired another Pete. Start fresh and new. I'm in the same camp. Nick says he referred to Alex Smith leaving because of the McCarthy. Right. So, Nick, right, you're talking about what Schneider was referring when he's talking about Alex Smith is that you had Mike McCarthy there as the young quarterback coach for Alex Smith, I believe, at that time. I don't even think he was OC, if I remember correctly. I forget how that worked. It was OC but he was just barely in there with San Francisco and Alex Smith, and then he got plucked by the Packers, and that definitely hindered then seemingly a little bit of Alex Smith's ascent or, his development, which I think is it's a real concern. And it does have a lot of people, I think, rightfully so, thinking, well, now John's leaning maybe more to a little bit of an offensive-minded guy. Alex says we do need to make a lot of salary cuts, and some might be tough. We need a younger, cheaper safeties like Diggs and Adams, but not worth all that money no more. We need to really work on the trenches. a lot of work to be done. I do expect both Adams and Diggs to be not here next year, which means you're going to probably go with young guys, cheap guys, maybe a drafted guy, but you're not going to go expensive, I don't think, at the position going forward. Spaces, I trust John's decision. I do too. It seems like they're doing the right role. Obviously, maybe we should just promote Izzo. I know you're kidding. Kevin says, I really can't wait to hear years from now how this team fell apart this year from attitude to tackling. I think we'll get a little more information more and more about how this is played out this past season and why the ownership reached where they reached, and it'll make I think if it doesn't make sense already, it will make sense by that point. Brian says, head coach's first question in the locker room is, so who objects to turning in their phones and giving up their TikTok accounts? Big facts, man. Big facts. I don't know if you could get any locker room to sign up for that at this point. I think that's just such a normal thing. Brian says, Pete won't call out players in public, but I'm sure he was frustrated with the Gen Z social media age youngins coming out of college. Yeah, it's something you hear in all walks of life right now, Brian, across all people that are dealing with the workers heading into this young generation now heading into the workplace. And I hear from different places, and I've got different connections in different industries, and it's all across the board. And that I'm not trying to say that this younger generation is bad, I'm not shaming them in that. But there's been some unique difficulties, it seems like at times, in a way that over these recent generations, it hasn't been, in order to get them to kind of, and maybe it's a good thing they don't want to toe the line. I don't know, but that you get them to buy in. You get them to not be as distracted. And it's some of the nature of the beast and how they've been raised and the environments they've been raised, and phones on 24/7 and always some kind of stimulation in front of you. It's hard to reverse that as you get a guy 22 years old, 23 years old into the building. But it has provided a unique challenge to coaches that now has to be a skill set you're looking for. Can you resonate with these younger guys? And I think Pete, as much as he is a youthful guy in his approach, and that, he's certainly, willing to try to keep in that role, I think that you just get that age where it's just, I can't get through to him. And he's used every trick in the book that he had, I'm sure, but it just wasn't working. And I think that's also a bit of the way this goes sometimes. Alan says, I told my friends who happened to be a Niner fan that we would like to have Harbaugh, and he gave me a shocking look. Oh, they wouldn't like it. As somebody said, their butt would start sweating if we brought Harbaugh in here. So they get that, they get that swamp ass real quick. So Pete needs DJ out of there, doing absolutely nothing instead of letting Kenny get some reps. The draft pick makes zero sense to me to this day. Yeah, they were in on DJ Dallas, man, that's for sure. I don't know why they activated him, never brought him out. He got injured the final week of practice, which was why he supposedly wasn't in the final game. But the McIntosh thing was weird, especially after some of the cut-ups we saw in camp of him looking really good at the running back position. Slow motion implosions, right, Bryony, as far as the Philadelphia Eagles. That thing was just, every week got worse and worse and worse. You talk about momentum just going in a certain direction and you just can't carve it back. You can't turn it back. The way it felt with them, man, where it just starts to go off the tracks and you ain't bringing it back on. Kevin O'Connell says, I'm 85% sure Kenny McIntosh isn't a real person. Man, the bit with all these Seahawks coaching prospects in the postseason, it's like we're still in it. It is kind of. Rockman Drums, here's one from left field. Tom Brady for head coach. Now, that is pretty left field. I think the Raiders would hire him because he owns part of the team there before we would. I would think. Nick Guzman, it pains me so much Boone participated in the cigar smoking. He should have told them all, not happening. He's a rookie. He didn't know better in that moment. You would actually hope for the vets in that moment to tap everybody on the shoulder, especially a guy like Julian Love, who I think does know better. You go, not the right spot, guys. Not the right occasion. This is a bad look. Your intention may be this. You maybe want to do it for this reason. You may want to do that. No. But it didn't. I don't know if that occurred. No, Tiger. Brandon, did you see what Callahan Cansey was doing to the Eagles' offensive line yesterday? I wanted him. Our team so badly last year in last year draft. He went one spot before JSN. He was going to be a better defensive line than Carter in a few years. That's a bold statement. I love it, Snow Tiger. I was a big guy in Callahan Cansey as well. I did think Jalen Carter was the best defensive lineman coming out, but I did think Callahan Cansey had a lot of similarities to him of an Aaron Donald. And I still maintain that. He's the first step quickness is just very, very comparative, excuse me. And he was penetrating in the backfield, showing off that quickness and showing off that ability that he had in college with use his hands with the quickness. It's a little bit like I've always felt like Snow Tiger that Aaron Donald worked with him back there at Pitt just because he looked so similar to Aaron Donald. He's at the same school as Aaron Donald, but he was a bit of a monster yesterday, and he's been a great pick for them throughout this year, Snow Tiger. And it would have been interesting to see if he had fallen to 20, what the Seahawks might have done at that pick if they would have had him as a higher valued player at that point than JSN. I don't know. They might have. Brian Myers, Hawks Nest. Commanders hired Niners assistant general manager. Thoughts on how that might affect coaching choices? Well, the scuttlebutt was this, Brian, initially, is that when they hired the assistant general manager from the Niners to go to Washington, the thought was that it was going to be a connection thing between Ben Johnson and him, that those guys are really good friends and know each other, and that they were going to kind of come as a pairing. And this would then somewhat explain why the Commanders' head coaching search has been so quiet compared to some of the other searches out there, like our Hawks one, that we're getting actually the release of the names of the guys they're interviewing. So some of this does seem to add up a little bit, right, Brian? That maybe that is still a bit of the case, where the intention is to bring in Ben and to match him with that general manager. We'll see how that all does play out, if that's going to be the way that this does go. But it makes the Niners a little bit weaker, which is a good thing for us. And maybe this makes it a little bit more likely at this point that the Niners pull, if not Ben Johnson, they end up pulling some resources away from the Niners and weakening the base of that building just a little bit. Yeah. Nick Guzman, Cansey had serious size issues coming out of school. I remember watching him and loving what I saw, but I wondered how he would translate to run defense, given he is very undersized for my defensive tackle. Well, I mean, Nick, there was a lot of guys that weren't necessarily super signed up for him. From my perspective, what helped me in looking at him, and it's always this way when you look at the prospects to me at the college level, is can you find the comparative? Can I find the comparative, the guy who kind of equals out to what this guy is? And when you look at the measurements between him and Aaron Donald, he's like an inch taller than Aaron Donald. He might have a little bit of shorter arms, but their testing numbers were very, very similar across the board. And he's not going to ever be Aaron Donald. I don't want to say that. He's not going to ever be the best defensive player for almost a decade. He's not got that up end. I didn't think he had that upside to him. But there's enough of that there, right, Nick? Like there was enough of that in 90% of Donald, 88% of Donald, that you go, okay, that's still going to be one hell of a player at the NFL level. The explosiveness was something that was a difference-making trait for him on the defensive line that defensive tackles don't have. When I say first step quickness, it almost undersells it. It's first step rocket ignition booster. That's what you got with Cansey coming off the ball out of college. And that's what you get with Donald. That's really where he begins within his skill set. You get the insane power for his size. You get the ability to use his hands as he's a technician in there. You get his ability to set linemen up. But it really first starts with Donald on that first step quickness and explosiveness that he brings out of his stance. He is up into that lineman before that lineman can even get out of his stance. He's to that gap before the lineman can even get up out of his stance. And Cansey can do a lot of that similar type of stuff. But Nick, your concerns there were a lot of other people's concerns with Cansey coming out on the size. Okay, 6'1", barely 300. Don't you need to be kind of more 310, 315 min now in this modern age? Hoyan Grenade says, be the obvious answer for head coach is Jake Bobo. Why not? He can do it all. Tommy says, the way young kids act is almost always the way the vets lead them. Brandon is right. Love needed to put that out. Unintended. Absolutely. Can't hit the rookies as much. This is why you have leadership in the locker room. This is why there have been people that have been questioning that leadership this past year, whether there was enough guys in there that were getting that and understanding that. And as I said at the time, a picture can speak 1,000 words and tell 1,000 words, tell 1,000 tales, whatever. However that saying goes, that's what it was there. And that spoke. I'm sure when ownership saw that and Schneider saw that, it did not make them happy. They did not go, oh, that's good. That's cool they're doing that. Just you gotta be smarter than that moment. You've got to be smarter than that as a player in that moment. And Nick, it was supposedly all Love's idea too. He brought them in. Yeah. It's a small thing, but it's also a big thing. Small things can also be big things. They can be personifications of bigger issues at play. And that cigar smoking incident was just that. Tommy says every locker room I was in was run by the players, at least through college. Good football teams, that's the way it is. I think it's the thing that was the step I think missing from Coach Carroll, getting this team to the place of being able to then take that next step forward in being contenders. It wasn't that they didn't have enough talent. I think that he wasn't able to get them to buy in. And what I mean by buy in is not buy in just to play hard. There's a little bit of that. But what I mean by buy in is that when I go back 10 years ago to Coach Carroll talking about a young team with a very young, talented secondary that was coming along around 2011, he was talking at that point, I think it was in an interview, it might have been with Brock and Salk at the time, where he's speaking in an interview with them about the next step of this process as this team was coming together and getting better. He says, okay, now this part of the process here is I've come to camp. And I said, now here, the next part of the process is on you guys. You to take on the ownership of leadership. You to say, okay, we're going to be leaders here. We're not just going to wait on the coaches to guide us through this. We're going to take the reins on this and pull the rest of the guys with us and make sure that they're on point with us as well. And sometimes you get locker rooms where they pick those reins up and they take them and they become those leaders and you get a lot of them. And sometimes you get locker rooms where nobody wants to pick up the reins, or there's just one guy picking up the reins and he's got all the reins in his hands, which is a little bit like what I felt Bobby had this year. Felt like he had all the reins of all the horses in his hands and he's trying to hold them all up here a little bit. And one guy cannot wear that heavy crown. It's got to be shared amongst the whole locker room. And it's a bit of the part that I think that was the valid question on Carroll amongst a lot of questions with him, is whether or not he could get that locker room to buy in that way, in the same way, once again. The Wu-Tang Life's environment, don't bring in a guy off the peat tree. We need to change, not keep it the same. Offense focused. I'd love to see the same thing, Wu-Tang. I'm with it. I'm with it, brother. Nick says, I absolutely remember Brandon being super high on him and stating the testing numbers relative to Donald. Good eyes, B. Thank you, Nick. I'm trying to get better at this every year, you know. I hope I am, and the hope here is it's why I wanted to grind on tape this year 4 months back. I'm 115, 120 deep on the prospects this year, is to try and, you know, get better at this, get it more entertaining, and hopefully be able to inform you guys more, just on the back of being able to kind of collect all that data through and distill it all down. But yeah, Cansey's he's a good player. And again, your hesitancies on his size are they're valid. There's not a lot of Donalds at his size running around in this league out there flourishing. You know, they are few and far between, where there is a little bit of, you know, back 20 years ago, you know, sub 300 pounds was fine. 290 was fine from the 3-tech, you know. Now you got to be up at that 310, 3.5. Now you need the 32 and a half inch long arms, which you love, or even up to around 33 if you can get there, you know. And that's kind of a bare minimum kind of thing to it. Tommy says, Bennett had that amazing first step quickness too. Don't need a move if you already buy the guy. That's right. That's right. And you got a guy at 330 pounds as a guard up in that inside, you know. Even when they're quick out of their stance, there's still a little bit of that, you know, it's like a tugboat turning, you know. And you get one guy who's just especially quick in there at that size, and he's just always then putting that offensive lineman in sort of retreat mode post-snap, right? Always in recovery mode post-snap, because they're to the spot quicker than this guy can get to the spot. And that's where you don't need to be big at that point, because you're to the spot, and then that lineman's usually trying to recover so fast to get to the spot that they've also lost the leverage game. So the line, you're to the spot, you're ready to beat them on the leverage, and then you're through and you're to the back of the gap. And Bennett was a master of that. You know, he was even showing off a little bit of that technique this last training camp, trying to show Mike Morris and a couple of those, Mario Edwards Jr., a little bit of that pinball technique where you get into that, you know, slice into that gap post snap, You absorb the contact off of the guard, and you're going to kind of bounce back into the lineman behind you. But use that, like anticipate the bounce back, because then once you kind of come off the wall of the back lineman, if you're keeping your momentum going through, you can kind of still squirt through that gap. You can still get into the backfield, and just a little bit of a master of that. But all like you say, Tommy, it all kind of comes off of initially that first step quickness. Nick Woolen wouldn't have been displaying such low levels of want to tackle if Sherman or ET3 was in that locker room. First time that happened would have been the last. Agreed. Tell me he's not going to listen to them. He's going to keep doing that stuff. These are all were indicators that you didn't have the strength of leadership you need. And that's something that's going to be a big part. I know building the staff, the right coach, getting these players to buy in, I think. But those other things are very important. But a coach that can get the players to buy in, whose message resonates, who can articulate it, who can, whatever that secret sauce is in this day and age. I don't know how you get to the young guys this day and age. I don't know how to do it. I'd probably be over there getting just as frustrated as Coach Carroll. Like, I told him what to do. I said A, B, C, D. He went from A to Z on my ass. But there are coaches that have shown an ability to do it. It is a bit of an art in this day and age, but it's a very important part. Tyler Gackey says, how about the Seahawks hiring Nick Saban? He's retiring from Alabama. I don't think Nick's a possibility. He had one little stop there with the Miami Dolphins as a head coach for about a half a minute. It didn't go very well. I think he is truly one of those kind of coaches that's just college coach. That's what he was. That's what he is. That's what he did. And maybe the best of all time in that respect. Nick says, KJ said the exact same thing, B. He said Bobby and Reed were the only guys with voices in the locker room. I buy it. I completely buy it. And that's not enough. Back in the day, we could talk about the Chancellors and the Shermans and the Earl Thomases that were certainly, I think stories we hear, even at Earl's points. And Earl sometimes sounds like he came off a little bit like with the a-hole vibe to him. But his pursuit was in pursuit of greatness and what he was trying to attain if he didn't see people doing things the right way in the field. But Bobby, KJ Wright, could just go up front. Just look at the front there. Guys that we don't talk a lot about. Red Bryant was a big leader in that locker room. Brandon McBain has been talked about on KJ's show the last couple of years over and over by a variety of players as being a big-time leader in that locker room. You had it all across the board. Max Unger on the offensive side of the ball. You need that many voices. If I'm that one guy that's going to be the rebel and I got 25 voices in the locker room saying, shut the F up, I'm going to shut the F up. If I'm that loud a-hole or I want to ride, do my own thing, and I've got 2 voices saying it, and there's 5 other guys like me in the locker room, guess which way the locker room's going to shift? WWDB71, Abraham Lucas was such a home run pick. I hope he can still play and be the right tackle of the future. I do too, WW. The knee is really the worry here, right? He has the ability. He's got upper level ability. He would fit to any scheme that you would want to put in. You want to go to a spread-based concept, so he can do that. You want to have him, ground and pound with his size. He's shown his ability to do that. But can they get the knee right? Seems like he's got to get a surgery of some type to get this. Maybe he needs that Regenikine. He needs to go out there to Switzerland and get some of that magic juice shot down into his knee. I don't know what it is, but the guy needs something at this point because the knee's been problematic here last 2 years straight. You can't let this be a third year. And if it is going to be a third year, you better find a viable option there that can fill in around him. Maybe that's going to be Stone for another year, but I wouldn't. Let's just get this fixed with Abraham, if it's possible. 3 Hours says, so on PFF, it says Newton is 280, but I keep seeing people saying 295. And anyone know what his actual weight is? Which Newton? I don't know which Newton you mean, 3 Hours, sorry. Greg, if you watch the Hawks mic'd up videos, Mafe, Brooks, Spoon, and Reed were vocal on the sideline, trying to get guys on the same page and going over what was working, not working, which was good to see. That is good to see. Mafe would be a great guy to rise up as the next guy kind of around there. Certainly Spoon with that. And Brooks, you don't know if he'll be back, but with those 2 guys in particular, that's the next generation to get it going. Jag Sports Talk with Jose. Brandon, check your DMs on X. I will for sure, Jag Sports Talk. I've been a little bit behind on that. It's just been a crazy last month or so here. So I will check up on that though. Space says, you guys think about the Tampa Bay stopping the tush push? When you got Vita Vea, it gets a little easier to stop the tush push. It always is about those guys getting the push up front and you having the defensive lineman that can kind of hold their ground and not be pushed back. And Vita Vea is one of the best in the league. And I'm not going to let you push me when I don't want you to when I don't want to be pushed. And not everyone's got one of those guys. Not enough there. Not many of those. Doug Baldwin, there's another one, Nick. Yep. He absolutely would have been another guy in that locker room, making sure he's keeping people on that line. Tommy says, KJ said that Earl was Pete's favorite. Kind of shocking with how it ended when you think about it. Well, maybe a little bit, Tommy, but also I think I can firmly say this about Pete. When he finishes up his time and he decides that they're going to invest $50 million into a safety position, 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams and a third, Pete likes himself safeties. And remember with this, Pete's background when he played football was at what position? Safety. That's what he rolled with. That's his joint. So it's like a linebackers coach drafting linebackers every year. It's just, I think he's got a preference. I think he likes that position. And Earl, the way he played the position and his special talents really made him love Earl with that. It's like the tandem of those two things. Tommy said she was saying E.T. was flipping the field off. It's weird. I thought that the direction was towards the Hawks sideline this whole time. It wasn't at the field itself. You would have thought that he would have pointed at the field. Nick says E.T. wasn't invited to Pete's celebration last week, and he wasn't even mentioned when they honored this Super Bowl win. It's wild. He's just been essentially erased. Yeah, it's been a tough end there with Earl Thomas, and it seems like as he went along with his career there, the ego and stuff started to really grow out of proportion. And, you burn bridges, it's hard to go back over and try to cross that water once again. And you flip your coach off after you've just been injured and put your coach in that kind of light. That's a tough look. That's a really tough look. And then the problems that have bounced up since then beyond that. Earl was a hell of a player, but he seems like a little bit of a difficult personality to contend with. And difficult personalities can burn people out. Tommy says, KJ said Pete's favorite were E.T., then Doug, then Sherm, that order. Amazing. We all thought it was maybe Cam, Russ, and Bobby. Indeed, I probably would have guessed more of those three. To your point, Tommy. Young, how you doing? It's good to see you in the house. Good to see you in the house. And folks, we are going to go ahead and put a little bit of a wrap on this show. I know this is going to be a bit of a quick show, but I'm going to hope this offseason to do a little bit more shows quicker on average as we kind of can in order to get this, to get more out. So I'll be back here tomorrow and Wednesday, and then we're going to be doing a Thursday show this week. Tomorrow, I just want to preview, we're going to be looking at the PFF scores for the Seahawks. End of season PFF scores. We've got a good full look at it. We can look at top to down what's happened here. So we're going to look at all of these individual players this year, look at what they did from a PFF score standpoint, get a better evaluation because we're going to need to make a determination on these players very soon as to what we're going to do with them. I want to thank the sponsor of this show, which is Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy has been sponsoring the Hawks Nest so kindly here throughout the course of this year. And you can use my code NEST or click down the description in the description below. I've got a link that you can click. And when you go to Underdog Fantasy the first time, they will match you up to 100% of your first deposit up to $100. So $100 on the Hawks Nest from me to you using my code, and you support the show at the same time. As I say, that is a win-win-win. Everybody ends up happy in that given scenario. And they've got some great ongoing contests even through the end of this playoffs. You can still get into some of those ongoing bets. You can do a playoff fantasy football, go up against other people across the nation, win some money. They'll still be giving away a lot of money, a lot of different contests, a lot of different ways to get in. And hey, even after the NFL season ends, you still got basketball, hockey, baseball. It never ends here over at Underdog Fantasy, and they will be sponsoring us throughout this offseason as they are. So thank you to them for sponsoring the show. I appreciate them for doing that. I thank you guys for using that code with them. There are some limitations that do apply in the state of Washington, but if you do go into a casino in the state of Washington, you can use the app in full. We will be back tomorrow about 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time to do the PFF wrap-up of the season and look at that. I'm sure we'll be discussing a little bit more of these coaching possibilities and talking about maybe some more guys that we might get announced to are on the coaching tree that are out there being in play as a possibility. I thank you guys here for checking out the channel, and I really, really, really from the bottom of my heart want to thank everybody that signed up as subscribers this year and who have been subscribers, of course, too, as well. We got over 15,000. I set a very aggressive mark this year to have 1/3 of our channel growth increase in 1 year. That's a lot. And we did it. You guys helped us hit that mark this year. We got inside even a couple of weeks time frame inside the mark. So thank you to everybody for helping us get up over the top of that 15,000 mark. It's just a nice round number, but it feels like a really good number to clear. It feels like a really great amount of growth to hit this year. And you guys have helped us get there. So thank you to everyone out there who subbed on up here to the channel here, who's helped us kind of get up over that mark. It's really, 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 really appreciated from my standpoint of things. Please do, if you can, for me, folks, hit that like button and sub up if you're not already on that side of things, as it will help this channel and this video show up on other people's algorithmic searches. We will be back in just a little over 24 hours here on the channel to look at some PFF scores with the Seattle Seahawks team. Another show on Thursday after that, so we're going to keep coming this offseason. It may be the offseason, but it's never the offseason here at the Hawks Nest, especially when we got a coaching search, especially when we've got a bright, bright future set to shine. Thank you guys for watching. See where we go with this. Let me know in the comment section who you'd like as a coach. Was there an outside the box guy that I didn't think about that you maybe, hey, what about this guy? Post him down there. Let me know who you want to go with. Who's your dream hire? Who's your defense? Who's your dream staff? Give it to me down there in the comment section. Let me know. I'd love to see it. I thank you guys for watching. Appreciate you. We'll be back in a little more than 24 hours, but until that time, I hope I don't have to remind you, but I'm going to do it anyway. You know, I just can't help myself. Please, my fellow Seahawks fans, do not you ever forget. Go Hawks.